So groupthink, social loafing are two threats to team effectiveness. There's 5 more that I want to go through, which have been articulated by a guy called Lencioni, who wrote a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of Teams. And what he did was he studied executive teams. So on the top of most organizations, you have an executive team that meets every once in a while to make big decisions, big strategic decisions. And typically, you will have the CEO, the CFO, the COO, if you have one, and the different heads of departments or different heads of divisions. And they get together and discuss how the organization is doing and where it should go and where priorities should be emphasized and all that kind of stuff. And what Lencioni found was that these executive teams are often very dysfunctional. They quite often, even though they're composed of smart people, they don't work very well as a team, if you think of the definition of teams we've given as opposed to groups last class. And he traced that to 5 nested conditions. So by nested, I mean that these conditions cause each other. So the first one causes the second, which causes the third, which causes the fourth and the fifth. So the first problem that you will find in those teams is people don't trust each other, absence of trust. Why would that be? Why would an executive team not trust each other? Can you think of any reasons? Why would you not trust people if you are the CFO, you're part of the executive team? Why would you not trust people in that executive team? Yes? Yeah. The potential that people are out for themselves, they might be out to get you if it helps them, right? They might be all vying for the same position. They all want to be CEO one day, and if I can make the other person look bad, so it makes me look good, maybe I'll do that. So that's one possibility. You might think that people are out to get you, or in it for themselves at your expense. What other reasons might you have? When you guys are part of teams, think about the last teams you were part of. What makes you not trust your teammates? When do you not trust your teammates? Right. You might think that they're not smart enough as you. Right? You might think that they don't have the ability. They've made mistakes. They've said something that makes you doubt their capability. Right? So you could simply, you could think that people are malintentioned, but you could also think that they're not good enough. Well, other reasons you might mistrust people?
Poor quality of work.
Yeah. So, again, so they could have, and that could be due to lack of ability, lack of willingness, not being on the same page, right? Lack of not sharing the same ethic, not having the same goals. Maybe somebody's okay to have a B on a project and you want an A, So you can be not on the same page, not looking for the same quality. Some people also not trusting. Some of us are trusting of others and some of us are not trusting of others. So those are all reasons that can erode trust. Now, what happens when you have a group of people that don't trust each other, when you don't have enough trust in a team? Well, what Lencioni notices next is when you don't trust people, you're more likely to be afraid of engaging in conflict with them because you don't know how they will react. You don't know how costly that's going to be. So think about this class. Think about the first, our evolution in the T group. At first, when you don't know anybody else, when you don't know if you can trust them, first thing is you ask yourself, can I trust these people? Right? It takes a while of a little experimentation to build the trust, to try things, take risks, right? But only when you start to have a certain modicum of trust can you afford to see what it would be like to have conflict, to disagree with somebody in the group. Right? I said earlier in the class we had on conflict that conflict is potentially costly. It can destroy trust, but also conflict can lead to much better communication, better decision making, right? So being able to have good conflict is a sign of health in a relationship. And the more trust you have, the more likely you can afford to have conflict. Think about, again, like your best friends, you're more likely to be able to have conflict with your best friend and recover from that than with somebody who you're not very good friends with. Right? So the more you trust somebody, the more you can afford to be in conflict and not let it collapse. So when you don't have trust, you have fear of conflict. When people are afraid of engaging in conflict in a team, what happens next is they're going to start to not feel committed to what the group decides. Imagine that you're in a project team at Cal Poly. You're working in a project for something. You don't trust your teammates. You're afraid of expressing disagreements to your teammates. And your team decides to go in a direction that you don't believe in, but you haven't been able to express disagreements. What happens next is you're going to start feeling lack of commitment to the action that the group has taken. That's when you start to talk about the team as they versus us. The language you use in your head, or even to talk about the team to other people. When you say my team, they, as opposed to we, that's a sign that you're not committed to the group, right? You're more likely to be not committed when you don't feel you can say what you really want to say. When you're not committed, one of the last things that will happen is you will avoid accountability. I see this, so in my regular class, this is a little bit of an experiment class, but in my regular class, I have my students do final projects in teams. And I always find at the end of I used to, like now I communicate this happens less. I had students come at the end and tell me, oh, but my team, if they had a grade they were not happy with for their final project, some students would come and say, my team was terrible, that they didn't do a good job, it's not my fault. That's avoidance of accountability. I don't want to be accountable for a team. And usually when I question them about what happened in the team, I will see a lot of this happening. They don't feel committed to the team. They disagreed with something that the people in the team did at some point, and they didn't speak up about it. And when I asked them, why didn't you speak up? There's this notion of like, I can't change what my team does. And what I usually say is like, that's what we're learning in this class. We're learning how to express our opinions, to engage in conflict, to realize that we have to be part of teams and accept accountability. Now, let me tell you this. How many of you have been in teams that you hated, that you felt like were not good? Right? Okay. How many of you were part of teams that you loved, that you thought did a great job? Okay, cool. So most likely, most of the jobs you will be in will require you to work in teams. And let me tell you, some of those teams will be terrible and some of them will be great, and you will be held accountable for the team's performance. Now, if you're the boss, if you manage a team, then you will be held even more accountable for the team, even if it's dysfunctional. Being the boss doesn't mean that you have a magic wand and all of a sudden you can order people around to work well. Any more than being a parent doesn't mean that all of a sudden you can order your kids around and tell them to be nice and have the family work well. That's a complex thing. So certainly, like some of the ingredients of successful teams, you can't force a team to be effective, but make it, helping build trust, making sure that it's okay to engage in conflict, meaning to express dissenting opinions and have respectful discussions around differences without getting defensive, practicing active listening, will lead to team members being more likely to feel committed to the team, to accept accountability for the team, including for stuff that they didn't control fully. That's one of the tricky, interesting stuff. When you become higher up in an organization, you're increasingly held accountable for things that you have no control over. right? So a CEO like company, like you might be reading the press. I don't know. I was take randomly like the CEO of what's the name of that company? The female CEO that was just fired. Tinder or something like that. Or I read it. Yeah, thanks. So there's a kind of term. There was a kind of reflection about female CEOs because there's not a lot of female CEOs, and one article was talking about how they might be more likely to be criticized than male CEOs, which is probably true. But so the idea is that she's held responsible for things that she didn't really have control over. In fact, the new CEO said, "I'm going to keep doing what she was doing." So she's, in a way, she kind of played the ejecting seat to give, the new CEO. She's done the things that needed to be done, and she's held accountable. So, but CEOs, presidents, bosses, they're held accountable for things they don't control. This might happen to you if you become the boss. But when you have a team working for you, you can still influence the teams by reversing those 5 dysfunctions. Okay, so next. So I want to talk about what are actions you can take, or what are factors that allow teams to be more effective. So we've talked about the reverse of these five dysfunctions are things that are desirable: building trust, engaging in productive conflict, developing commitment, accepting accountability, including for things you cannot control.